So welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Jessica Lori and I'm the program director at the Interfaith Center at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. We're a nonprofit organization whose mission is to invite people from diverse secular, spiritual, and religious traditions to participate in one another's practices in order to cultivate appreciative understanding and friendship. We seek to unify people around common moral, social, and ethical concerns in order to build a more just and equitable society. So tonight we have a special guest with us. His name is Daniel Epstein. While traveling the globe as a marketing director for Procter Gamble, Daniel made time to interview and photograph 500 people from 27 countries, documenting the power of faith and spirituality. Daniel's a marketing and innovation consultant based in Cincinnati, Ohio, and a former Procter Gamble Harley Procter marketing director, which is the highest distinction and title given to marketers at Procter Gamble, only 20 in their whole company history. So outside of work, he's dedicated to building bridges across cultures and faith. And in 1994, Daniel co-founded and then co-led the Cincinnati African American Jewish Community Dialogue. Following the race riots in Cincinnati in 2001, Daniel co-led Open the Space Cincinnati, a unique large group race relations dialogue program. So I'm happy to have you here with us tonight, Daniel. And Daniel's going to give us a little presentation about Portraits in Faith, which is the project that I mentioned at the very beginning. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Daniel.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Let me just get the slides pulled up and we will be on our way. Okay. And Jessica, can you just remind me that where I have people's images from Zoom doesn't interfere with the slides? You're seeing the whole slide?
I am, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for asking me to join you tonight. We're actually gonna jump right in and do more of the explaining later. You know, my story, you heard some of the professional background, but the more spiritual, well, there's a practical part to this story and a spiritual part to the story. The practical part to the story is I went to a summer workshop in Maine for photography, and I grew up Jewish in the South, so I've done a lot of interfaith work in my day. I've always felt called to bring people together. You know, it's one of these workshops where you have to write up an idea and start shooting with your camera that afternoon. And this idea of portraits in faith came to me because they were pushing me to get out of still life and move into portraits, and nothing has been more important to me than interfaith connections. But really the backstory, the spiritual backstory is that as a psychiatrist in Boston once described me to his colleague, I was a young man who wasn't happy about much. Thankfully, I'm not that person anymore, but that was who I was at the time. You know, through this project over the course of many years, I'm pleased to let you know the patient has survived through the dark night, and at least I feel I am a more grateful, connected, and of service person today. And I think this project has had a lot to do with it. This has been 18 years. I've been fortunate to interview and make portraits of 500 people in 27 countries. Every time you bought a box or a bottle of Tide, well, you weren't directly funding this project, but you were at least giving me a job that allowed me to go around the world to help people sell more Tide. And that enabled me to interview all these people. I would add on personal days to my business travels. And I would hire local producers, and I'd say, oh, I'm coming to Tokyo on these days. I'd like to interview 3 to 5 people a day who'd be willing to share their spiritual journey with me, or their their understanding of faith. Not theology. Sometimes I have to ask the theological questions like your concept of God, but in general, this has been about what's your spiritual experience? What's been your faith experience? Which not only is what I needed to hear to have greater hope and gratitude in my life, it's also what can be shared more commonly amongst us, not theology and dogma and ritual. So I've been fortunate to do this work. I left P&G 8 years ago to start my own consultancy, but I still continue to work on it. And I'll tell you more about how we've published the work. It's both in website and coffee table book form now. And we are now a nonprofit organization, a 501c3. And I'll tell you more about that at the end of the presentation. I want to jump right in, now that you have that bare minimum of context, to what I call a photographic meditation. I want to share with you the questions that I asked people, and then I want to share with you some of the portraits I've made. It's all black and white photography. So first of all, the questions. I ask pretty much the same questions all the time. And believe it or not, I learned from my market research training at Procter Gamble to be careful not to lead the witness. I ask questions and then I try to only say, oh, say more or tell me more about that. Here are the questions that I've asked those 500 people, or the majority of the 500 people. What is your earliest memory of faith? What was the first time in your life you had to or chose to rely upon God as you understand God? Tell me about a time you doubted your faith. What happened? What are you most grateful for? What is your greatest wish? Do you have a message? And what would you like people to know about you when they see your portrait? And now I'd like to share with you 60 of the 500 portraits that I've made of these individuals. They're not meant to be religious portraits, although some are. The main idea that I hope you take away is I'm trying to capture each person's essence, especially as seen through their eyes. So, I invite you to relax, take a deep breath, and receive these 60 of the 500 people. And I have this will play to some music, and this will last 10 minutes. So think of this as a meditation. And here we go.
I am a pilgrim and a stranger, traveling through this wearisome land. I have a home in that yonder city, good Lord, and it's not made by hand. I've got a mother, a sister, and a brother who all have gone this way before. I am determined to go and meet them, good Lord, over on that other shore. of his garment, good Lord, then I know he would make me whole. I am a pilgrim and a stranger, traveling through this wearisome land, and I've got a home in that yonder city, good Lord, but it's not made by hand.
Oh my God, unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal to them thy great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide within thy law. Help them, oh God, help them, oh God, in their endeavor, and grant them strength to serve thee, oh God, oh my God. Leave them not to themselves, but guide their steps by the light of thy knowledge, and cheer their hearts by thy love. Verily thou art their helper. Verily thou art their Lord. Oh my God, unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal to them thy great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide within thy law. Help them, oh God, help them, oh God, in their endeavor, and grant them strength to serve thee, oh God, oh my God, and grant them strength to serve thee, oh God, oh my God.
So I'd like to maybe go ahead and make this interactive and ask for some of you to share any thoughts and feelings that come up when you see that content, when you see those individuals.
Hello, this is Kathleen,
Hi.
and I'm wondering, how did you get people to look straight into the camera?
Yeah, well, I just asked them to look at me. Yeah, it was, I've only taken 2 photography courses, so I look at these portraits and I'm like, I don't know who took them. That's why I call it my sacred errand. Yeah, just I ask people to look at me, look at the camera, look in the camera, and try to be relaxed. I would try to make their portrait after I interviewed them, so that we were in a certain sacred space, a relaxed space. And then there's some photographer tricks like close your eyes for a few minutes, rest the eyes. Okay, now open the eyes. I tended not to do any of the modeling tricks like turn your head to the back and then whip it forward. I think the answer to your question, Kathleen, is grace.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, go ahead, Marilyn. Are you going to call on people, Jessica, or how's this going?
I don't see a hand raised. If Marilyn has her hand raised on, I can unmute. There we go.
She just muted your unmute. Marilyn, do you want to try again to unmute? We can't hear you, Marilyn. Oh. Okay, we can't hear Marilyn. Does someone else want to go? Jessica, do you want to share any thoughts?
Yeah. In particular, I just started looking at everyone's eyes in the photos, and I just saw a lot of honesty there. That there seemed, like you said, and it makes sense now that you've said it, that after looking at those photos, there's a peace in their eyes from having talked about their faith, which I think is really telling of what having those kinds of conversations, the closeness that it can bring between people.
Yeah, well said. Kathleen, do you want to make another comment? Your hand is raised.
Yeah, my name is Pete, and I was wondering about that one picture that struck me. There was a gentleman sitting on a park bench kind of thing, I think, and he had a framed object next to him in a picture frame.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, Panama or Venezuela or whatever. Yeah, do you remember that one and what he was showing you?
Yeah, his name is Dr. Israel Cedeno. He's a physician in Panama, and he converted to be a Baha'i. And on the day he converted or became a Baha'i, he also received, that was a CAT scan of a benign but slightly growing tumor in his brain. And it continues to be there. It's not chosen to have, or it's not been safe to operate on, and it's been, because it's benign, but it's still growing. It's kind of a test of his faith, as he says, to be a physician who's also ill in that way, and to be okay, but to also, be mindful of that. So it figures into his story quite centrally.
Sure. One more question then. Do you have a way of keeping up with all these people? Do you maintain contact with many of them, or?
I do. for sure, I keep in touch with the people who have been hired as my producers, which, by the way, are not always, official commercial or film producing people. It could be my producer in Rome was a journalist, an American journalist who had lived there for a decade, and and sometimes it's just someone who's pretty well connected in a community. So I'm very connected to all my producers, or many of them, and I am connected to many people in the project around the world. I also, this is going to sound a little pessimistic, but it's not meant to be. There's about, certainly 20 people who've passed away, at least 20. And last I checked, one day everyone in the project will be dead. And so, including me. And so this will become almost like a time capsule of faith at a moment in time, at a moment in history. And so that's poignant too for me. And in fact, Pete, there's a number of people, families who I know continue to go back to their loved ones' interview. Because I'm also asking people about things that we don't often sit down and just talk about. Maybe you understand a parent or a sibling's faith journey and some of the events, but sometimes we just don't have it all in one place. I should mention one more thing, which is, for the most part, the project is not about famous people. For those of us who enjoy these spiritual circles, there are some notables from the Jewish world. Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, the creator of Jewish Renewal, Father Thomas Keating from Snowmass, who has done a lot with 11th step meditation, centering prayer. Father Richard Rohr participated 2 years ago from Albuquerque. Some of you may be familiar with just the amazing researcher and translator and mystic Mirabai Starr, who has written extensively about the feminine, the divine feminine, and the wisdom of women mystics across religions. But in general, those I just named the names, but in general, and then there's some, Anna Halprin, who recently passed away, who was 100 years old and was considered the mother of postmodern dance. People like that. So, but for the most part, it's, people with compelling and interesting journeys that they were willing to share with me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to move on. So what I want to share with you is just how some people have answered some of those questions. As I said at the beginning, in general, I try not to get into theology. But sometimes it's important for me to understand what someone's concept of a higher power or God is. And so I want to share with you two that were profound for me. In this project, I have really gravitated more than anything else to two kinds of stories. The first are, and this is going to surprise you, atheists. I think there's a tremendous amount that we who try to have a faith of some kind need to learn from atheists and humanists. And my favorite interview in the whole project is with an atheist, and you're about to see an excerpt of it. The other group of people that I've learned so much from are indigenous people, whose spiritual beliefs are rooted in land and all of creation, the stones, the mountains, the plants, every animal, with a symbiotic relationship with nature that I certainly never thought about. So I want to share with you an excerpt of the interview with my favorite atheist, and then an excerpt of an interview with a very important Aboriginal elder who also passed away in the last 5 years from Australia, named Uncle Bob Randall. So let me share this. This is Tom Boy Shah from Victoria, Brazil, and he is the atheist that I'm speaking about. So here's an excerpt of his interview. Let me just skip forward a bit.
Well, I'm Tom Boechat. I live in Vitória, Brazil.
What does faith mean for you today? How does it manifest in your life?
Well, I don't pray. I don't feel the need to pray. But I do believe that faith is something that we created, we humans. I don't think a dog prays. I don't think a plant prays. I think it's something that we developed, that something that we found the need for it. And instead of God creating us, I think we created God. And that's okay. I don't have a problem with that, because I think it's just a concept. And for me, faith is not believing that this is the most important thing. That having things is the most important thing. And I don't mean to, I don't want to make a vote for poverty. It's not that. I want to have things. I just don't want things to have me. And
this is Uncle Bob Randall, who was part of the stolen generation, taken from his mother at 7 years old, never to see her again, in the Northern Territory of Australia. When he died, he was one of the registered landowners of Uluru, what was anglicized to be called Ayers Rock in the Northwest Territory. And this is him describing being part of the stolen generation as a 7-year-old, sent to a mission, a residential school, and what they would do when they got beaten by the teachers and the headmasters. And how many of you may know that in Aboriginal Indigenous culture, the sun and the earth are actually mother feminine, and the moon is actually masculine. And so he describes how they would lay, when no one else would comfort them, they would lie on the earth and the mother would hold them. And they would say to the mother's son, "Please hold me, Mom." And the mother would hold them.
When you were beaten, you felt really alone because the other kids were terrified to go near you or help you because they too was afraid of being beaten. You had to get this access of connecting with the sun or Earth Mother as quick as you could so that it could have a chance to comfort you. Sometimes we just lie on earth and just say, "I've had it. I need you to hold me." And then she would. The mother would hold you. And sometimes you just say to the son, "I need you to hold me, Mum," and she'd hold you. We only had those two mothers. Our Earth mothers were taken away from.
Our earth mothers were taken away
weren't
from us.
there.
They weren't there.
The people who said they were our mothers, the men who were our fathers, wouldn't even touch us because of our darkness.
So I do find great meaning in what people understand as their higher power. And those are two examples. I asked people, what is your earliest memory of faith? Here's a wonderful reflection by Anna Halprin, the mother of postmodern dance.
Okay, this is Anna Halprin, and I live here in Kentfield, California, right outside of San Francisco. Old. And every Saturday we would go visit my grandparents who lived on the west side of Chicago, where all the Jewish community lived. But they weren't just Jewish community, it was a recent immigrants. And I would go to see my grandfather in the synagogue because that's where he was on Saturday. And I would be asked to sit up in the balcony because that's where all the women were to sit. So I was very proud to be able to sit with the women. And here I was, this little girl, and I'd walk down the block all by myself. And it was a regular ritual for me that every Saturday I would go visit my grandfather in synagogue and would go upstairs and sit with the women. And then I'd look down over the balcony and see if I could find my grandfather. And my experience was just so beyond anything I had ever seen in my life at that time. To see this very vigorous man with a long white beard and white silky hair jumping up and down with great ecstasy, and I would hear these kinds of words that I had never heard in my life, and it was all so mysterious. I just couldn't put it all together. I don't understand, was this really my grandfather? Or the way he was flinging his arms in the air and chanting these unusual sounds that were obviously in some form of Hebrew or Yiddish. But there was something that would move me in a way that I had never as a child experienced. And I felt that, well, at this moment, when my grandfather was dancing like this, that he must be God. Because as a 5-year-old, my image of God was an old man with long white beard and long silky white hair. And I thought, oh, this is how God prays. And that was so embedded in my awareness. And then even to this day, I can picture it as if I were there now. And then when it was all over, he would know that I was there and he would wave to me and I would go down and meet him and he would pick me up in his arms and he would hug me and pat me. And then we would hold hands and we would go back home. And I thought, oh, this is a blessed moment because I'm holding God's hand and we are dancing together. And that image has stayed with me all my life, as if that's what I've been searching for my whole life, is to find a dance that would mean as much to me as his dance had meant to him.
I'm gonna skip past Reb Zalman, and I'd like to share with you another meaningful response. Growing up Jewish in Atlanta.
I started off as
growing up Jewish in Atlanta, I have a strong connection to the African American community, and I got exposed to a lot of African American Christianity. It's something I write about in my book. But this is an amazing soul named Renee Morgan Brooks, who now lives in Arizona, but was the minister of music in Louisville at the Unity, it was either Unity or Unitarian Church. And this is what she shared with me about her earliest memory of faith.
I started off as a Baptist. And then my mother decided that she was going to look into Jehovah's Witness. And that never took for me because by that time I think I was in 16 and my grandmother lived with us. And so my grandmother was a Baptist born and bred and she was going to be a Baptist when she's dead kind of thing. So at age 16 and there's no father in the house, then that means, because my father died when I was 5, that means I now have the responsibility of driving my grandmother to the Baptist church, coming back and getting my mother into the chauffeur, the religious chauffeur run. However, Sunday mornings were all about fixing hair and fixing waffles and getting everybody situated and ready to go to church, and singing. My grandmother and my mother both sang in the choir. So while I'm preparing to take them their separate ways, there are always gospel songs that are being sung, songs of faith. My mother was a breadwinner, my grandmother was the homemaker. And when it was hard for my mother, she would sing. And it's that kind of song that I could just imagine Harriet Tubman singing. I couldn't hear nobody pray. Couldn't hear nobody pray, Lord, way down yonder by myself, and I couldn't hear nobody pray. When it became fulfilled, she'd sing things like, said I wasn't gonna tell nobody, but I couldn't keep it to myself. No, I couldn't keep it to myself. No, I couldn't keep it to myself. I said I wasn't gonna tell nobody, but I keep it to myself what the Lord has done for me. And then she just squeezed herself like this and said, thank you, Lord. Oh yeah, that's what I was raised with. So there was no chance not to be connected with this flow of spirit.
I'm going to skip forward and share how one or two people responded to really the central question, which is, what was the first time in your life you feel like you had to or chose to rely upon God as you understand God? Sorry, I just need to look to see who I'm going to choose. Well, I'm gonna start with an amazing woman named Harriet Rosetto, who founded an incredible institution now over 30 years old in Los Angeles called Beit Teshuvah, which was really the first halfway house and addiction treatment center specifically designed for Jews coming out of the prison system in California. And this is her story of how that came to be out of a place of suicide. Give me a second.
40s and 50s, I'm 73. Recently that I was a missionary, I looked for meaning in parenting, and I looked for me to find my quest and search of a mission for a lot of my life.
I'll just start from the beginning.
I grew up in Paterson, New Jersey in the 40s and 50s. I'm 73. And my mother told me recently that I was a missionary child. And I've been in search of a mission for a lot of my life. That's really what's defined my quest. And I couldn't find it for a lot of years. And I looked for meaning in love, and I looked for meaning in parenting, and I looked for meaning in being a social worker. But I was always dissatisfied and in search of the thing that had my name on it. I was jealous of My first heroine was Eleanor Roosevelt. I was jealous of people who seemed to know what it is they were called to do, and I couldn't find that thing. And so a lot of my life was spent, I think, feeling empty and dissatisfied and negative, and life is hard and then you die, you know? I was a young mother in the 60s. I was part of that whole movement, never finding how to put my pieces together. You know, they were always at war with one another, my inner parts, until Beit Tshuva. So this has been my place of wholeness and of healing. And I'm finally feeling that my calling came to me, you know? I can recall, actually, because I didn't have it for a very long time, or at least I had faith only in negative things, right? My faith was that nothing good would happen really, and that you could always count on being disappointed. And when that changed was the whole way in which I found the calling. When I went to see this woman who was a metaphysician and science of mind lady. And I was at a really down place, a bottom, I think, in my own life. Had no idea what to do. I'd left social work. My one child had gone off to college, and I thought, well, that's it. There's nothing more for me, you know? So before I killed myself, I went to see this lady, and she said, what is it that you want? And I never saw any kind of spiritual help. I considered myself an atheist, at least an agnostic, a cynic, a skeptic. This was not for me, but I was pretty desperate. And she said, what do you want? And I said, well, that's my problem. I don't know what I want. What I want is, I want to know what I want. And she said, do you pray? I said, lady, come on, pray. You know, I'm an intellectual, I'm a Jew. I've never prayed in my life. And she said, I'm going to pray for you. So she said, Father of the universe, take this woman by the hand and guide her to her rightful work. She knows she wants to do something to make a difference. She doesn't know what it is. She said, that's it. Now you pay attention. A little hokey, but I was unemployed and I was looking in the WAN ads, and I had left social work. I wanted to do something else, make a lot of money. And something said to me, well, why don't you see what social work has to offer? And in retrospect, that was the still small voice, I think. And so I looked, and there was this tiny little ad. It was the smallest ad on the page. And it said, person of Jewish background and culture to work with Jewish criminal offenders. And that was my moment, you know. Every time I retell it, and I've retold it a lot over the years, the hairs on my arms stand up, that they call in the program God bumps, you know. And I thought, oh shit, you know, this is it. And this worked. And I made a very rational decision to call that divine calling, to call that a moment of faith. You know, that this woman prayed for me and I was guided, and it was mine. And this was it, what I had been searching for. And that changed everything for me. And that gave me staying power, because every time I wanted to quit in this whole process, or the negative voice got strong, I remembered that there was a divine thing at work here. And, you know, if I just stuck with it, the answer would come. And that sustained me for 25 years.
So what happened after you read the ad?
So I read the ad and I went down for the interview. And, you know, when you go with the kind of surety that comes from knowing you've been divinely sent, you present yourself in a certain kind of way. And I didn't tell them I was divinely sent because it was a mental hospital. I don't want them to lock me up, yeah. And they hired me, and I started visiting Jewish people in jails and prisons. And I was hooked from day one, you know, these were my people. And I saw myself as the translator, the person who knew them and identified them with them, but who was, you know, from the right side and could translate. And there was nowhere for people when they came out. And so I got this notion to start a place, a Jewish home where people could come when they got out of jail or prison and could, you know, re-enter life and heal from their addictions. So I wrote a grant for a one-time purchase, and we bought an old house down near the barrio as part of a mental health complex called Gateways Hospital. And I had no operating budget and no staff, so I moved in. And that was it. That was almost 25 years ago. And in the course of things, I met Mark, my husband now, who was then an inmate in the state prison, who's now a rabbi, and we do this together. And we built a community and a family here, really. I mean, a place where I feel connected.
So if you didn't catch that reference at the end, she fell in love with an inmate after his, and he eventually became a rabbi and
Actually, when I was little,
and ran Beit Teshuvah with her. I'm just going to skip ahead to the last one I want to share with you. This is Brother Bo Sanchez, who's a really popular and well-regarded Catholic preacher, not a priest, but a Catholic preacher in the Philippines, who speaks pretty openly about his porn addiction, but even more than his porn addiction, his addiction to pleasing people.
Why was I molested? Why was I sexually abused? Maybe because I deserved it. Maybe I'm dirty. Maybe I'm ugly. I became addicted to pornography because, you know, any kind of addiction is really trying to escape the sadness, the emptiness, the shame within you. Even more than pornography, I became addicted to pleasing people. I began to project onto God what I felt about myself. Maybe God is also ashamed of who I was. Maybe God didn't like me also, because I didn't like myself. And maybe God is a God with a checklist of my sins. I fell again in pornography. Oh, but what's new? I cannot pinpoint a particular day and time where suddenly I realized He wasn't like me. But gradually, it just grew on me. But there is this God who accepts me as I am, and who loves me and enjoys me, who likes me, doesn't just love me, He likes me, He likes all of me.
So just, I want to make some closing comments before I open it up for any questions. You know, for a long time, I thought this project was about everybody gets to tell their story. And then a friend of mine sent me this book by the guy that created StoryCorps that many of you know about from NPR. And his book is called Listening as an Act of Love. And then I realized, this project isn't about telling your story. It's about listening to someone's story. It's about receiving someone's story. And then it even occurred to me how much more so it's about receiving the story of someone that I might perceive to be the other. And then we all have different notions of what and who the other is. You know, to be frank, growing up a scrawny, wimpy Jewish kid carrying a cello to the bus stop in 1970s Atlanta, Georgia. The other was, you know, kids named Bubba who tried to kick the shit out of me. You know, so for me, the uneducated white male is the other that I need to work with. I was grateful. Ken Burns, the famous documentary filmmaker, has been an advisor for over 10 years to me through P&G Work Connections. And I was trying to figure out what to do with all this content because people urged me to share it. And he said, have the courage to say this isn't a film. Everybody wants to make a PBS special, but not everything is meant to be that. And around the same time, I have a really good friend, Richard Emmert, who's a Pentecostal Christian. And he said, I have a message for you. Just put this out there and God will work with what you put out there. And I thought that that was beautiful. And so what we did is we decided, okay, we'll create a website, because I couldn't afford time or money to publish all 500 at once. So we started with 13 people. Here you see Harriet, who you just saw the video of. We started with 13 people on a website back in 2013. And now we've published 125. We have 3,000 subscribers to our content. We've had just over 400,000 views on YouTube with, you know, in this digital culture, an average view of 2 minutes is pretty long. So I'm very grateful. You know, we have spiritual objectives, not commercial objectives. So I feel good that this is out there. People urged me then to share it in a more contemplative form. Here, I'll just skip by that. Oh, sorry, I'm going to skip ahead to another slide. No, I must have skipped it. Well, we've published a coffee table book. I'll share a link with you in a minute. Anyway, this past December 4th, we launched a coffee table book that also contains the first 125 portraits. And one of the things that I'm so grateful for is I never expected to be a writer and to share my own reflections about the spiritual meaning of these portraits. But for every one of the 125 portraits, there's a quote from their interview and a reflection from me on what spiritual lesson was provoked in me because of this person. And I do try to be provocative. So for example, you'll find reflections like, when is it the right decision to not forgive somebody? Or what are the spiritual issues for someone who is transgender? And what are the spiritual issues for those of us who want to be inclusive of transgender people? What are the spiritual issues of homelessness, both for those who don't have a home and for those of us who do? How do we know if we are working in what God or higher power would want us doing, if we're doing something for ourselves? So these are some of the things that I write about. Portraits in Faith is now a 501c3, and we're going to focus on 3 things going forward. Maybe you'd be interested in one of the 2 that I'm going to share in a minute. We're going to continue publishing, and in fact, we've identified the next 125 portraits of the 450 to publish. So I'm about to publish a portrait of a Christian minister in Tokyo, who has a beautiful story of being prayed for. And so I write about what is the experience of people praying for you. In addition to publishing, I want to work on 2 other things. The first one is what I call sacred listening workshops. Sacred listening to me is receiving the story of someone you perceive to be the other. And I have this idea that we could teach that as a skill and give that as an experience to people. And rather than, you know, if you wanted to do it as a group, I'd be happy to do a workshop with you, but I don't really intend for it to be an interfaith piece of work. I actually want to start in each of our communities, you know, which could be a religious community, it could be a synagogue or a church or a community center. And, you know, because there's always an other in the room. You know, I can only speak for myself. I'm usually judging somebody. You know, I try not to. I've tried to do a lot of spiritual, psychological work, but, you know, there's always an other in the room. So if we could learn to work with the other in the room, we could certainly then work to receive the story of someone outside of the room. I also have this concept of universal prayer. I've done a lot of dialogue work, and I actually am tired of it. It has a place, you know, oh, you show me yours, I'll show you mine, you know, ritual, prayer, whatever. But I really believe we need to be praying together. Yes, it could be from our different traditions, but it might be something different. But I just believe we need to be in prayer and meditation together and to hold the space for a more sacred outcome to a lot of the problems that face our world. So that's what I'm doing with Portraits in Faith. I'd be happy to collaborate with you guys, and I'm open to answer any questions. Thank you for having me. I can't hear you, Jessica. You're on mute.
There we go. Thank you for telling me. Thank you so much for joining us. And does anyone have any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself if you would like to ask.
I'd be interested if anybody here has had any experience of what I'm calling sacred listening, receiving the story of someone you perceive to be the other.
I'm not sure if the focus of it, and well, the focus of it, I'm sure wasn't that the other person was the other, but I think in a lot of circumstances, any person is the other. If it's even, no matter who it is that's one-on-one, it can feel that way, you know? So I think that I love just the brilliant idea of pointing that out and making it an exercise that's done purposely. I think it's a great idea.
You know, one of the things I've struggled with, Jessica, is how do I not empower someone who intends harm by receiving their story? You know, would I have wanted to sit down and receive the story of a Nazi in 1933 Germany, or 38 Germany? Would I have wanted to, oh, tell me about these beliefs? Or do I want to sit down with a Klan member? You know, I grew up very close to where the Klan would burn crosses at Stone Mountain, Georgia. And I've talked about this with colleagues, and my consensus and their consensus is that is a risk, and we have to be careful. We have to be careful who we empower. But the belief is that the vast majority of people do not intend harm, or they might have strongly opposing views, but they don't intend to kill me, send me off to the gas chambers. But that's not true for everyone, but the vast majority, and that the benefits of stopping to see so many people as the other outweighs the risks that sometimes we're going to have to say, no, I'm not interested in engaging you. You know, that I didn't mention my professional work, but I work in applying cognitive and behavioral science and things like evolutionary psychology to marketing and public health behavior change. And there's a really dirty little secret in evolutionary psychology, which is that it's been good for human survival to consider somebody the other. That's how you stayed alive, was this is us and that's them. And if I could solve a problem, it would be, how do we make it adaptive to, how do we make it maladaptive to see somebody as the other rather than adaptive? And to me, that's really the struggle. It's hardwired into us to see people as the other. And so that's my struggle. That's what I work on. How do you say your name? Yeno?
Yeah, yes. In a culture where individualism is most sort of important issue around here, how can you easily open people up to tell a story so that you can make some sense out of it? And usually people don't believe in being listened to because in a way they don't know what you would do. When you hear them speak.
Yeah, it's true. I never get to talk to the people who say no, right? Because they don't show up on my schedule. And many people do. Even, I'm embarrassed to say, one of my own people, a very ultra-Orthodox rabbi in Caracas, Venezuela, said, well, I'll be in your project. You just can't put my picture next to anybody who isn't an ultra-Orthodox Jew, because I've made certain choices in my life. I said, well, thank you very much, but that's not the project, you know? There has to be a level of trust that you're not going to misuse the content. Now, granted, you might not do it with a video camera like I do. But I think that we have to sometimes have these experiences orchestrated, or it can just be as simple as asking people questions and not trying to insert our own experience, but really receiving them, receiving their answers and just saying, thank you. Thank you. That touches me deeply. Thank you so much for sharing that. You reminded me about something I wanted to share before we conclude. What was the beginning of what you said, Yeno? You were saying
word of individualistic kind
yeah,
of behaviors.
Yeah. Do you know Father Richard Rohr? Do you know the writings of Richard Rohr?
No.
He's a rock star Franciscan priest. He actually was based in Cincinnati early in his career, but now he's been out in Albuquerque for many years, and he runs something called the Center for Action and Contemplation. And he talks very openly that that faith in the church has been ruined by Western individualism.
Mm.
And so if you're interested in that topic, I definitely recommend the writings of Richard Rohr, particularly his book called The Universal Christ. And there's an amazing interview, not because I did it, but because he goes through a lot of his thinking on my interview with him on my site. And anyway, my site is portraitsinfaith.org. You can find it there. But I agree with him. We have been consumed by Western individualism, and we have forgotten what he says, and maybe I'll end with this thought, Jessica. What he says is that salvation has become an escape plan for the chosen few. And that what we have forgotten is that salvation is a collective salvation. We're all saved or none of us are saved. In the bigger metaphysical sense, not just a Christian sense of salvation. That, we in this together, and that salvation is not an individual task. And I love that idea. And you know what? I have one more thing to share, which is, Thomas Merton, who I just wish I could have met, has this amazing, you'll have to forgive me, I just have to look at something real quick, this quote, because I sent it to someone earlier today. And I think that this is, for me, the essence of the spiritual journey now. Thomas Merton said, instead of hating the people you think are war makers, hate the appetites and disorder in your own soul, which are the causes of war. If you love peace, then hate injustice, hate tyranny, hate greed, but hate these things in yourself, not in the other. And so, I pray every day to have God root out from inside of me the causes of war and the causes of hate.
Thank you. That's a beautiful prayer. Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Jessica, for inviting me. And, I'd be happy to collaborate with the community at any time. If you're interested in exploring this idea of sacred listening, just let me know.
Okay, we will, definitely. Thank you. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.